The gunshot pierced the evening air, startling Olivia Hayes from her desperate prayers. It wasn't the sound that frightened her, but the knowledge that her father's hunting party had returned and with it, her impending fate. Montana Territory, 1878, was no place for a woman deemed unfit for marriage, especially one whose family had just arranged her future without consent. "They're back," Olivia whispered to herself, quickly dabbing her tears with a handkerchief. At 22, she'd been told she was practically a spinster, and after rejecting the wealthy banker's son from Helena, a man 30 years her senior with hands that wandered too freely during their chaperoned meetings, her father had reached his limit. "You'll marry Thomas Whitfield or you'll leave this house," he declared that morning. "I won't support a willful, ungrateful daughter." Her mother had simply looked away, her silence more painful than her father's words. 5 younger sisters watched with wide eyes, learning the consequence of defiance. Olivia smoothed her blue calico dress and descended the stairs of their modest but respectable home. Her father, Harold Hayes, stood in the entryway, his hunting rifle propped against the wall, mud-caked boots leaving prints on the floor her mother had scrubbed that morning. "Have you reconsidered?" he asked without greeting. Olivia lifted her chin. "I cannot marry a man who sees me as property, father." "Then you have made your choice." He pulled an envelope from his coat and tossed it onto the sideboard. $20, more than you deserve. The stage leaves for Billings at dawn. I expect you'll be on it." "Harold," her mother finally spoke, voice trembling. "Surely there's another way." "Silence, Martha. The girl has defied me for the last time." That night, Olivia packed her few belongings. 2 dresses, undergarments, a silver hairbrush that had been her grandmother's, a small Bible, and the money that would have to sustain her until she found work. No one came to her room to say goodbye, not even her mother. Dawn broke clear and cold as Olivia stood beside the stagecoach, trying to swallow the lump in her throat. The driver loaded her small trunk while passengers boarded. "Last call for Billings," the driver shouted. Olivia took one last look at the town she'd called home all her life, half hoping to see a family member rushing to stop her. The street remained empty except for a few early risers and a tall cowboy loading supplies onto his wagon. The journey was dusty and uncomfortable, 5 passengers crammed inside as the coach bounced over rutted roads. An elderly couple, a traveling salesman and a young minister who kept glancing at Olivia with poorly disguised interest. "Heading to Billings alone, miss?" he finally asked. "Yes," Olivia answered, offering nothing more. "Family there," she shook her head. "I'm seeking employment." "A young woman alone." The minister began, his tone suggesting concern but his eyes saying something different. "Perhaps I could assist you." "The church always needs." "I appreciate your offer, sir, but I'll manage," Olivia interrupted, turning to stare out the window at the passing landscape. 2 days later, the stage pulled into Billings, a growing town that smelled of sawdust, livestock, and opportunity. Olivia stepped down, legs cramped, stomach empty, and spirits low. The driver tossed her trunk down with little ceremony. "Best check the Pioneer Hotel," he suggested, noticing her uncertainty. "They sometimes hire girls for cleaning and such." Olivia thanked him and lifted her trunk, struggling with its weight. She'd made it halfway down the boardwalk when the trunk slipped from her grasp, bursting open and scattering her belongings. "No, no," she muttered, frantically gathering her undergarments as passers-by stared. "Need a hand, miss." Olivia looked up to see worn leather boots, dusty denim, and eventually the sun-browned face of a cowboy. He knelt beside her, helping collect her possessions without touching anything inappropriate. "Thank you," she said, embarrassment heating her face. "Asher Oaks," he introduced himself, tipping his hat. "Just arrived myself, heading to the Triple R Ranch outside of town." He was perhaps 30, with eyes the color of summer sky and lines that suggested he smiled often. "Olivia Hayes," she replied, accepting his assistance with her trunk. "I'm looking for work." Asher studied her for a moment. Pioneer Hotel's full-up trail cruise in town, but Mrs. Wilson at the cafe might need help. She lost her waitress last week to marriage. Olivia nodded gratefully. Thank you, Mr. Oakes. Just Asher, miss. Everyone calls me Ash. He hefted her trunk. Let me carry this for you. Town's no place for a lady alone with luggage. They walked in companionable silence to Wilson's Cafe, a modest establishment with gingham curtains in the windows. Inside, the aroma of coffee and fresh bread made Olivia's empty stomach protest audibly. Mrs. Wilson, a plump woman with graying hair and shrewd eyes, looked Olivia up and down. Ever waited tables before? No, madam, but I learned quickly. Where's your family, girl? Olivia hesitated. Back east, she lied, unwilling to admit being cast out. Mrs. Wilson exchanged glances with Asher, who was standing just inside the door with Olivia's trunk. She just arrived, Mabel, Asher said. Seems capable, HMPH. Well, I need help, that's certain. Mrs. Wilson wiped her hands on her apron. Room upstairs, meals, and $2 a week. Work starts at 5 in the morning, ends when the last customer leaves. Sundays we close at 2. Thank you, Mrs. Wilson, I accept. Good. Ash, take her trunk upstairs, first door on the left. Mrs. Wilson handed Olivia an apron. Rest today. Tomorrow you work. Asher carried Olivia's trunk up the narrow staircase and set it down in a small but clean room containing a narrow bed, a washstand, and a hook for clothes. Thank you for your kindness, Olivia said. Folks should help each other out here. He hesitated at the door. I'll be heading to the ranch tomorrow. Stop by the cafe sometimes for supplies. Olivia managed a small smile. I'll see you then, I suppose. After he left, she sat on the bed, allowing herself one brief moment of tears before washing her face and reporting downstairs to observe the workings of the cafe. The next weeks passed in a blur of exhaustion and adaptation. Olivia learned to balance trays, memorize orders, and dodge the wandering hands of certain customers. Mrs. Wilson proved fair but demanding, and the work was harder than anything Olivia had done before. True to his word, Asher appeared every few weeks, always tipping his hat to Olivia and leaving a generous gratuity. Sometimes he lingered over coffee, telling her about life at the Triple R where he worked as foreman. Boss is fair, he explained during one visit. Pays well, treats men with respect. Good cattle operation, though this drought's making things tough. It hasn't rained in weeks, Olivia agreed, refilling his coffee without being asked, making everyone edgy. Town's getting rough after dark. You staying safe up in your room? The concern in his eyes made something warm flutter in Olivia's chest. Yes, Mrs. Wilson locks up tight. One evening in late August, a group of trail hands entered the cafe, already drunk and rowdy. Mrs. Wilson exchanged concerned looks with Olivia but couldn't turn away paying customers. Just serve them quickly, she whispered to Olivia. Olivia approached their table, pad in hand. What can I get you gentlemen? Well, ain't you a pretty thing, the largest man said, reaching for her waist. How about a little sugar with my coffee? Olivia stepped back. We serve food and drinks, sir, nothing more. The men laughed, making crude comments that brought heat to her cheeks. She took their orders with shaking hands and retreated to the kitchen. I don't like the look of them, Mrs. Wilson muttered, preparing their meals. Finish up with them and then start closing. We'll shut early tonight. Olivia had just delivered their food when the door opened and Asher walked in, earlier than his usual supply run. His eyes narrowed at the scene before him. The large cowboy grabbed Olivia's wrist as she set down his plate. Sit with me, darlin'. Make a man feel welcome. Please let go, sir, Olivia said firmly, trying to pull away. Now that ain't friendly, the lady asked you to let go. Asher's voice cut through the cafe like a knife. The cowboy looked up, sneering. Mind your business, friend. Olivia is my business. Asher moved closer, his posture relaxed but his eyes hard. And you're upsetting her. The man released Olivia's wrist but stood, towering over Asher by several inches. You her man or something? Something like that, Asher replied evenly. Now why don't you boys enjoy your meal without bothering the staff? For a tense moment, Olivia feared violence. Then the man laughed and sat down. Ain't worth the trouble anyway, just having some fun. Asher guided Olivia to the counter, his hand gentle on her elbow. You all right? Yes, thank you, she whispered. Mrs. Wilson emerged from the kitchen, shotgun in hand. Everything settled? Yes, madam, Asher assured her. Just a misunderstanding. The cowboys finished their meal in relative quiet and left. As Mrs. Wilson locked the door behind them, Olivia released a shaky breath. You didn't have to do that, she told Asher, but I'm grateful. Actually, I did have to. He looked uncomfortable for the first time since she'd met him. Came to talk to you about something. Mrs. Wilson, mind if I have a word with Olivia? Mrs. Wilson raised an eyebrow but nodded. Use the back table, I'll be in the kitchen. When they were seated, Asher twisted his hat in his hands. Got word today. Army's requisitioning cattle for the northern forts. Triple Artiques sending a big herd up. I'll be gone 3, maybe 4 months. Disappointment washed over Olivia, surprising her with its intensity. Oh, well, that's a good opportunity, I imagine. It pays well, he agreed, but I was wondering, would you write to me? I know it's forward of me to ask, but I'd like that, Olivia interrupted, a smile breaking through her fatigue. Relief crossed his face. Good, that's good. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. Addresses where you can send letters. Might be slow getting them, but knowing there's mail waiting would mean a lot. Their fingers brushed as she took the paper, and neither pulled away immediately. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. I should go, he finally said. Early start tomorrow. At the door, he turned back. Take care of yourself, Olivia Hayes. You too, Asher Oakes. The cattle drive created a strange emptiness in Olivia's routine. She hadn't realized how much she looked forward to Asher's visits until they stopped. She wrote to him weekly, sending letters to the designated posts along the trail. His replies came less frequently, but were worth the wait. Pages filled with descriptions of the landscape, cattle, and his thoughts of her. In his absence, Billings continued to grow. New businesses opened, including a proper hotel that drew customers away from the boarding houses. Mrs. Wilson worried about finances, cutting Olivia's hours when business slowed. Not your fault, girl, she assured Olivia. Just can't afford full wages when we're half empty. Olivia penned a worried letter to Asher, then folded it away unsent. His problems on the trail were surely greater than hers. September turned to October, bringing early snow and fewer customers. Mrs. Wilson finally sat Olivia down one evening after closing. Can't keep you on full-time anymore, she said regretfully. You've been good help, but the money's just not there. I understand, Olivia said, though panic rose in her throat. Her savings wouldn't last long and jobs were scarce. You can keep your room through month's end, Mrs. Wilson offered. Give you time to find something else. That night, Olivia stared at the ceiling, considering her options. Return home and beg forgiveness? Impossible. Her pride wouldn't allow it, and her father would only use her failure as proof he'd been right. In the morning, Olivia visited every business in town, asking for work. The general store needed no help. The new hotel had just hired 3 girls. The laundry would take her on for half what she'd earned at the cafe. Accepting the laundry position as a last resort, Olivia spent her days up to her elbows in scalding water and harsh soap that cracked her skin and ruined her nails. The work was backbreaking, the hours longer, and her new room in the laundress's home little more than a closet with a cot. She wrote to Asher just once from this new situation, careful to sound more cheerful than she felt. When no reply came for weeks, she wondered if he'd lost interest now that she was no longer the pretty waitress who served his coffee. November brought bitter cold and even less work at the laundry. Mrs. Peterson, the owner, reluctantly reduced Olivia's wages again. Can barely feed my own children, she explained. You might try the Paradise Saloon, they're looking for girls to serve drinks. Olivia shook her head. I couldn't. Just serving drinks, Mrs. Peterson clarified. Though I won't lie, some girls make extra upstairs. Your choice, of course. That night, with her stomach growling and her fingers bleeding from the lye soap, Olivia counted her remaining money. Not enough for a stage ticket anywhere, barely enough for 2 more weeks of food. The next day, swallowing her pride, she applied at the Paradise Saloon. The owner, a surprisingly refined man named Mr. Brooks, hired her immediately. Just serving drinks, he confirmed. Though the men will flirt, smile, be pleasant, but you needn't do more. Some girls choose to entertain privately upstairs. They make good money, but that's entirely voluntary. Olivia nodded, relieved yet ashamed. What would Asher think if he knew? The thought surprised her. Why should his opinion matter so much? The saloon work was easier physically but harder in every other way. Olivia endured pinches, propositions, and lewd comments with a fixed smile. She refused all offers to go upstairs, though the money was tempting when her boots developed holes and the winter winds blew through her thin coat. December arrived with no word from Asher. The cattle drive should have ended by now, Olivia calculated. Perhaps he'd found someone else. Perhaps he'd never cared at all. One night, as snow fell heavily outside, the saloon was unusually quiet. Only a few regulars huddled near the stove, and Olivia was wiping tables when the batwing doors swung open, bringing a blast of cold air and a tall figure dusted with snow. Her heart stopped, then raced. Asher stood in the doorway, scanning the room until his eyes found her frozen in place, rag in hand. Wearing the revealing costume, Mr. Brooks required a far cry from her modest café uniform. Shame and joy warred within her as he crossed the room. Would he judge her? Turn away in disgust, Olivia, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I got your letter, came as soon as I could. Asher, she couldn't continue, tears threatening. Let's talk somewhere private, he suggested, noticing the interested stares from other patrons. Mr. Brooks, surprisingly understanding, let Olivia take her break. They sat in a small office off the main floor, Olivia clutching her shawl around her shoulders. The café closed, she explained hurriedly. I tried everything else first, I promise. I know. Mrs. Wilson wrote me too after my letters to you returned unopened. He reached for her hands, frowning at their reddened, cracked state. You've had a hard time. I'm managing, she insisted, pride still present despite everything. Olivia, he said gently. Why didn't you tell me things were so bad? She looked away. You had your own concerns, and we're just friends, are we? His thumb traced circles on her palm. Because I rode 3 days through snow after getting your letter, thinking about nothing but reaching you. Hope fluttered in her chest. The drive went well, very well. Boss gave us all bonuses. I've saved almost everything I've earned these past 2 years. He hesitated. I bought land, Olivia, my own ranch just north of here. Small but good water, good grass, room to grow. That's wonderful, she said sincerely. It needs a lot of work, and it needs a woman's touch. His eyes held her steadily. I know this is sudden and you've no reason to say yes, but I've thought of little else but you for months. Olivia's breath caught. What are you asking? Come with me. Help me build something, as my wife if you're willing, or just to have a safe place if you're not ready for that. Your wife, she whispered. Asher, you barely know me. I know enough. His hand gently cupped her cheek. I know you're strong and proud and kind. I know you make me laugh. I know I missed you something fierce these past months. My family cast me out, she admitted. They didn't want me. Asher's eyes softened. Then they're fools. But their loss is my gain because now you have mine. Your family, my heart, my home, my name if you'll take it, he smiled. I've got a sister in Denver who'll love you, and old ranch hands who already think of me as their boy. It's not much, but it's loyal and true. Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. I've been alone so long, you don't have to be any more. He brushed away her tears. Say you'll come. Even if just to see the place before deciding. Olivia thought of her cramped room, her dwindling prospects, and the warmth in Asher's eyes that had sustained her through months of letters. Sometimes leap of faith was all one had. Yes, she said, I'll come. They left Billings 2 days later, after Olivia gave notice and collected her few belongings. Mr. Brooks wished her well, pressing a small bonus into her hand. "You were too good for this place anyway," he said gruffly. The journey north took 3 days by wagon, through snow-covered prairie and rolling hills. Asher pointed out landmarks, speaking of spring grass and summer wildflowers. His enthusiasm was contagious, and Olivia found herself planning gardens and imagining the homestead in warmer seasons. "There it is," he finally said, pointing to a simple cabin nestled against a hillside, smoke curling from its chimney. "Home." An older man emerged from the cabin as they approached, waving warmly. "That's Walter," Asher explained, "retired cowhand, watching the place while I was gone." "Like an uncle to me." Walter helped Olivia down from the wagon, his weathered face creasing in a smile. "So you're the girl who's had our Ash writing letters by lamplight. Welcome, miss." The cabin was small but solid, with 2 rooms and a stone fireplace. Asher had prepared a separate sleeping area for Olivia, respecting her virtue until they could properly marry. "Pastor comes through every month," he explained. "Due next week, if that suits you." Olivia explored her new home, touching the handmade furniture and sturdy walls. It was simple but built with care, much like the man who'd created it. That evening, as Walter retired to the small bunkhouse and Olivia and Asher sat by the fire, she finally asked the question that had lingered. "Why me? You could have any woman." Asher considered her question seriously. "First day I saw you, struggling with that trunk but too proud to ask for help, I admired your determination. Then I got to know your kindness through those coffee conversations. Your letters showed me your mind thoughtful, sometimes funny, always honest." He took her hand. "And somewhere along the way I realized home wouldn't feel like home without you in it." The week passed in a blur of activity. Olivia learned the workings of the ranch, modest though it was. 20 head of cattle, 2 milk cows, chickens, and a vegetable plot now dormant under snow. Asher showed her his plans for expansion, the fences he'd build in spring, the additional room he'd add to the cabin. Walter taught her to make sourdough bread in the Dutch oven, grinning with approval at her quick learning. "Girl's a natural, Ash," he declared. "Got good sense about her." On the 7th day, Pastor Mitchell arrived as promised, his wagon cutting through fresh snow. He greeted Olivia warmly, showing no judgment at her living arrangement. "Asher's a good man," he said privately while Asher and Walter prepared the cabin for the ceremony. "Known him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. You've chosen well." "I think we chose each other," Olivia replied. They married before the fireplace, Olivia in her best dress and Asher in a clean shirt, his hair still damp from washing. Walter stood as witness, beaming like a proud father. The vows were simple, the kiss that followed anything but. When Pastor Mitchell pronounced them husband and wife, Walter let out a whoop that startled the chickens outside. That night, after a celebratory supper where Walter drank perhaps too much whiskey and told embarrassing stories of young Asher, the older man tactfully retired to the bunkhouse early. Alone with her husband, Olivia felt suddenly shy. Asher seemed to understand, sitting beside her on the bench by the fire, simply holding her hand. "Never thought I'd have this," he admitted. "A wife, a home that's truly mine. Always figured I'd die a ranch hand on someone else's spread." "I never thought I'd find someone who wanted me for myself," Olivia countered. "Not as a convenient wife or a pretty ornament." Asher lifted her hand to his lips. "I want everything about you, your strength, your stubbornness, your smile, even your burnt biscuits." They weren't that burnt. "Walter's chickens wouldn't touch them," he teased. Olivia swatted his arm, laughing despite herself. The tension broken, they talked late into the night, sharing hopes and plans until the fire burned low and Asher finally stood, pulling her gently to her feet. "Come to bed, Mrs. Oakes," he whispered. "If you're ready." She was. Winter passed in a cocoon of happiness. Olivia learned ranch work, surprisingly enjoying physical labor that had purpose beyond mere survival. She cooked, sewed, helped with animals, and fell into bed each night exhausted but content, wrapped in Asher's arms. Letters arrived from her younger sister Emma, sent secretly against their father's wishes. Olivia learned her family had told neighbors she'd gone to stay with distant relatives. Her refusal to marry Thomas Whitfield was never mentioned. "They miss you," Emma wrote. "Mother cries sometimes. Father won't admit he was wrong, but he keeps your photograph in his desk." Olivia shared the letter with Asher, who held her as she cried for loss, for anger, for the family she still loved despite everything. "Would you want to see them again?" he asked carefully. "Someday," she admitted. "Not yet." Spring brought new life to the ranch. Calves were born, the garden planted, and Olivia discovered she was expecting their first child. Asher's reaction to the news was everything she could have hoped. He lifted her in a joyous embrace, then set her down with exaggerated care as though she might break. "A baby," he repeated, awestruck. "Our baby." Walter was equally thrilled, immediately starting to carve a cradle from aspen wood. "Every child needs something made special," he insisted. As her belly grew, so did the ranch. Asher added 2 rooms to the cabin, a proper bedroom and a nursery. They purchased adjacent land when a neighbor decided to move to Oregon, doubling their acreage. In late summer, when Olivia was heavy with child, a wagon approached their homestead. She was hanging laundry while Asher and Walter repaired fences in the north pasture. Shielding her eyes against the sun, Olivia recognized the visitors with a shock that made her grab the clothesline for support. Her parents sat stiffly on the wagon seat, her mother clutching a package, her father looking older and more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. Olivia's first instinct was to run inside, but pride kept her standing as the wagon stopped. Her mother descended first, eyes filling with tears at the sight of Olivia's pregnant form. "Oh, Livy," she whispered, using the childhood nickname long abandoned. Her father remained on the wagon a moment longer, seemingly gathering courage before climbing down. "Daughter," he said formally. "Mother, father." Olivia's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "This is unexpected." "Emma told us where to find you," her mother explained. "We've come a long way." "Why?" Olivia asked, the single word containing months of hurt. Her father cleared his throat. "To see if you were well, to meet your husband." He looked around the neat homestead. "You've done well for yourself." "No thanks to you," Olivia replied, then regretted the sharpness when her mother flinched. "I deserve that," her father acknowledged. "I was wrong, Olivia, too proud to admit it until now. Thomas Whitfield proved himself a scoundrel, left town with another man's wife and embezzled bank funds." "I'm sorry to hear that," Olivia said, meaning it despite everything. "We brought something for the baby," her mother said, holding out the package. "I've made blankets for all my grandchildren, couldn't bear for yours to go without." The simple offering broke through Olivia's defenses. Tears welled as she accepted the gift, her hands brushing her mother's. A shout from the distance announced Asher's return. He and Walter approached rapidly on horseback, having spotted the unfamiliar wagon. Asher dismounted in a fluid motion, moving to Olivia's side with protective concern. "Everything all right?" "Yes," Olivia said, finding she meant it. "Asher, these are my parents, Harold and Martha Hayes. Mother, father, this is my husband, Asher Oakes." Asher's posture remained wary, but he extended his hand. "Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Hayes." Harold hesitated only briefly before shaking Asher's hand. "You've built a fine place here, Mr. Oakes." "We've built it together," Asher corrected, his arm slipping around Olivia's waist. An awkward silence fell, broken by Walter announcing he'd put coffee on. The invitation to stay couldn't be ignored, and soon they were seated around the table Asher had crafted from pine. Conversation was stilted at first, but as Olivia shared stories of ranch life and her parents spoke of changes in her hometown, the tension gradually eased. When her mother asked to see the nursery, Olivia led her inside, leaving the men to talk. "Are you happy, truly?" Martha asked when they were alone, gently touching the cradle Walter had made. "Yes," Olivia answered without hesitation. "Asher loves me for exactly who I am." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "I should have stood up for you, should have stopped your father from sending you away. I've regretted my cowardice every day." Why didn't you write? Pride, fear, then shame made it harder with each passing month. Martha clasped her daughter's hands. Can you forgive me? Olivia considered the question seriously. I'm trying, she finally said. It still hurts, but I'm trying. It was enough for now. They returned to the main room where Harold and Asher seemed to have reached an understanding of sorts. Your husband tells me you're expanding the herd, Harold said to Olivia. Smart business move. It was Olivia's idea, Asher said proudly. She's got a head for figures better than mine. The visit lasted until dusk, neither awkward nor entirely comfortable, but a beginning. As they prepared to leave, Harold extended his hand to Olivia. We're staying in town 3 days, he said gruffly. If you'd permit another visit. I would, Olivia replied, surprising herself with the realization that she meant it. After they departed, Asher held Olivia as she processed the unexpected reunion. You all right? I think so, she said. It's strange. I've been so angry for so long. You've every right to be. Yes, but... She searched for words. I don't want our child to grow up without knowing their grandparents, flawed though they are. Family is complicated. Asher kissed her forehead. That it is, but ours. His hand rested on her rounded belly. Ours will be built on love and respect, I promise you that. 2 weeks later, their daughter was born during a magnificent sunset that painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. They named her Aurora, for the dawn of their new life together. Olivia's parents returned for the birth, staying to help during those first exhausting weeks. Harold proved surprisingly adept with the infant, walking the floor with her when she was colicky. Martha taught Olivia family recipes and soothed her anxieties about motherhood. When they finally returned home, promises of future visits were made on both sides. Reconciliation would take time, but the foundation was laid. One evening, as autumn painted the cottonwoods along the creek in brilliant yellow, Olivia sat on the porch with Aurora sleeping against her shoulder. Asher joined her, his day's work complete, bringing a quilt to wrap around them against the evening chill. Penny for your thoughts, he said, his arm warm around her. Olivia looked out over their land, the cabin now a proper house, the expanded herd grazing in the distance, Walter teaching a new ranch hand by the corral. Their family chosen and created. I was thinking about that day in Billings, she said, when my trunk burst open on the boardwalk. If you hadn't stopped to help. Fate, Asher suggested, or divine providence, either way I'm grateful. She leaned into his embrace. When my family cast me aside, I never imagined finding something better. Now you have mine, he reminded her, echoing words spoken months ago. Forever. Forever, Olivia agreed, as their daughter stirred and the western sky blazed with promise.